At 7:10 a.m. in the Eastern Pacific, a single radar return shattered the calm as the USS Sampson advanced through its patrol zone. The early signal showed a vessel moving at high speed, with its identification system disabled, and the track suggested deliberate attempts to avoid detection. Moments later, the ship's infrared sensors captured multiple objects being thrown overboard, a pattern often linked to offshore smuggling groups trying to erase evidence before authorities can respond. These indicators pointed to a threat that required immediate action, setting the stage for a rapid and coordinated response. The decision to launch the MH-60R Seahawk marked a critical escalation in the operation, and it demonstrated how quickly the crew of the USS Sampson can shift from detection to direct action. This response began the moment the command team confirmed that the unidentified vessel was ignoring radio calls and discarding multiple packages into the ocean. The ship was already operating within a region known for long-distance narcotics routes, and this created significant urgency because delays could allow evidence to disperse or suspects to escape into international waters. As a result, the commanding officer elevated the alert posture and instructed the aviation crew to prepare for immediate deployment. This step reflected a standard operational practice in maritime interdiction. Yet in this case, it carried greater weight because indicators pointed to a well-coordinated smuggling run. The MH-60R Seahawk lifted from the deck only 90 seconds after the order was given, and the rapid launch reflected the high level of training that supports Pacific Watch. The aircraft gained speed quickly and descended to a low altitude so the crew could maintain visual contact with the suspect vessel, while also using onboard sensors to refine its track. The helicopter reached approximately 120 knots as it moved along the projected intercept path. This speed gave the crew a clear advantage because the go-fast boat depended on direction changes and sudden bursts of acceleration to evade capture. The low flight profile also allowed the team to observe surface conditions and identify any hazards that could complicate the pursuit. From the air, the helicopter crew saw the suspect vessel making sharp zigzag movements as it attempted to disrupt visual tracking. The pattern suggested that the operators were familiar with maritime counter-detection tactics, and this supported the assessment that the vessel was engaged in illicit activity. Several more objects were thrown into the water during these maneuvers. The spacing between the splashes indicated that the suspects were discarding cargo at a high rate in an effort to reduce the amount of evidence on board before an interdiction team could arrive. This behavior strengthened the crew's understanding that swift action was required to secure the scene. A key moment occurred when one of the discarded packages reacted upon striking the water. The burst of white spray revealed how unstable the material inside could be when exposed to moisture. This reaction suggested that the shipment contained a refined narcotic that had not been fully sealed. The crew recognized that this created a dual threat because the chemical instability increased the danger for anyone on the vessel and complicated the recovery process for boarding teams. The visual confirmation from the helicopter provided a vital piece of information for the command team on the USS Sampson, and it reinforced the need to restrict the vessel's movement before additional evidence was lost. The information gathered from the Seahawk during these early moments shaped the next stage of the operation. The data included the speed of the suspect vessel, its irregular path, the rate at which cargo was being discarded, and the chemical reaction observed after one package hit the water. These observations helped the command team evaluate risk levels and prepare for the possibility of escalation. They also ensured that the operation remained coordinated and that every decision reflected the broader goal of protecting maritime security in a region where criminal networks continue to adapt their methods. The situation moved quickly, and the actions taken in these early minutes set the foundation for the phases that followed. The transition from verbal warnings to the use of controlled force formed a critical stage in the operation, and it reflected how the United States Navy applies escalation measures in a structured and accountable manner. The MH-60R Seahawk approached the suspect vessel with its communication system activated so the aircrew could issue clear instructions that ordered the operators to slow down and prepare for inspection. These warnings were an essential requirement because they demonstrated that the Navy attempted peaceful compliance before taking any further steps. The helicopter maintained a steady position as the crew monitored changes in the vessel's speed heading and behavior. The acoustic commands were delivered repeatedly to ensure they could be heard over the noise of the engines and the surrounding sea. This initial attempt was intended to prevent further risks and to encourage a response that would allow the authorities to carry out a lawful inspection under maritime security procedures. Although the warnings were issued in accordance with international protocols, the suspect vessel continued to accelerate and altered its path in ways that suggested an effort to prolong the pursuit. The increased throttle produced a long wake that showed the operators were attempting to create distance, and this made it more difficult for the helicopter to maintain a safe intercept angle. The continued disposal of objects into the water raised additional concerns because the rate at which packages were being thrown suggested that evidence was being destroyed rapidly. The aircrew cataloged these actions because every maneuver could affect how the boarding teams would later secure the scene and recover the remaining material. The refusal to comply made it clear that the suspects were intentionally rejecting the lawful requests made by the United States Navy, and this pattern of resistance elevated the level of risk associated with the pursuit. The crew evaluated each development carefully while observing the requirements outlined in maritime law. One of the most important principles in such operations requires that any use of force be proportional and based on necessity. Since the vessel was still underway and discarding significant amounts of cargo, the risk of losing key evidence increased with each passing moment. This reality shaped the assessment process on board the USS Sampson, where the command team reviewed the reports from the helicopter and determined whether additional action was justified. The persistence of the suspects created a situation in which passive measures were no longer effective. The fact that the vessel remained unresponsive meant that the Navy could not safely initiate a boarding attempt, and it emphasized the need to stop the vessel before more material was lost. The decision to move beyond verbal warnings led to the use of a controlled warning shot fired at a safe distance ahead of the vessel. This step followed established procedures intended to signal the seriousness of the situation. The burst of rounds striking the water created a visible line that the suspects could not ignore, and it provided a final opportunity for them to reconsider their actions. The helicopter maintained its position to monitor whether the operators would change course or reduce speed. Despite the clarity of the signal, the vessel continued its evasive movement and sustained the same rapid pace. This refusal confirmed that the suspects had no intention of cooperating, and that additional steps would be required to bring the situation under control. After these measures proved unsuccessful, the command team on the USS Sampson conducted a final review of the risks associated with continued flight and evidence loss. Their evaluation demonstrated that the longer the pursuit continued, the greater the danger became for both the suspects and the responding units. The helicopter crew had already documented the unstable reaction of one discarded package, showing that the cargo posed a chemical hazard and could complicate recovery if the vessel continued at high speed. These conditions supported the conclusion that immediate intervention was necessary. The commanding officer then authorized the use of precision fire to disable the vessel's engine. This decision aligned with operational standards because it focused on stopping the vessel rather than causing harm to the individuals on board. The shift to direct action represented the final stage of escalation and prepared the operational environment for the next phase, when boarding teams would move in to secure the suspects and recover the remaining evidence. The shift to direct intervention placed the MH-60R Seahawk at the center of the operation, and the helicopter became the key asset responsible for ending the pursuit before more material could be lost at sea. The aircraft repositioned itself with deliberate and controlled movements so the crew could establish a clear line of sight on the suspect vessel's engines. This approach reflected the careful planning that guides aerial interdiction, because the objective was to stop the vessel without endangering the individuals on board or the recovery teams waiting for the next stage of the operation. The aircrew examined the vessel's speed angle and wake pattern to determine the safest moment to apply precision fire, and this assessment shaped the final decision to move forward. When the helicopter settled into its firing position, the crew opened the cabin door to prepare the weapon system for use. The gunner worked through a series of checks that ensured the weapon would operate reliably in the wind and vibration created by the low-altitude flight. The position of the vessel changed slightly as it attempted to maintain speed, and these adjustments required continuous corrections from the aircrew. Each correction was necessary because the success of the action depended on accuracy. The objective was not to strike the hull or create unnecessary danger, but to disable the propulsion system so the vessel could no longer flee. The gunner calibrated his aim and waited for the brief moment when the helicopter's movement aligned exactly with the engine's position. The burst of controlled fire struck the outboard motor with measurable effect. A flash of sparks appeared, first followed by a cloud of smoke that drifted into the air as the engine lost power. The sudden decrease in speed displayed how quickly a go-fast boat can become vulnerable once its propulsion system is compromised. The water behind the vessel turned from a turbulent wake to a slow ripple as the remaining engine struggled to maintain momentum. Within moments, the vessel came to a stop, and the sound of the helicopter's rotors became the dominant noise in the area. The immediate halt demonstrated that the Navy's decision to use precision fire prevented further risk while allowing the broader mission to continue. The reaction of the individuals on board confirmed the effectiveness of the intervention. With the vessel now motionless, the occupants recognized that escape was no longer possible. They raised their hands to show compliance, and their posture indicated that the threat of resistance had diminished. The helicopter maintained its altitude so the crew could observe the scene and ensure that no additional movement suggested an attempt to restart the engine or discard remaining material. These observations were significant because they provided the command team on the USS Sampson with the situational awareness needed to authorize the next phase of the operation. The helicopter's continued presence also served an important security function. By keeping the aircraft overhead, the Navy ensured that the area remained stable until the boarding teams arrived. The aircrew monitored the drift of the disabled vessel, the position of the packages in the water, and any changes in sea conditions that could affect the safety of the approach. This oversight allowed the boarding teams to prepare for their movement from the USS Sampson with confidence that the scene had been fully secured. The stable aerial view reduced uncertainties and supported the coordination required for the next step. These actions concluded the aerial component of the pursuit and created the conditions necessary for the operation to shift from interdiction to capture. The decisions made during this phase reflected a balance between operational precision and legal responsibility, and they illustrated how maritime enforcement requires cooperation between airborne units and surface teams. The transition to the boarding stage marked the beginning of a new set of challenges that would determine how the suspects were taken into custody and how the remaining evidence was secured for investigation. The launch of the two RHIBs marked the beginning of the surface phase of the operation, and this stage required coordination that matched both the pace of the aerial action and the standards expected in maritime enforcement. The boats departed the USS Sampson at high speed, as the crews prepared for a visit-board search and seizure mission. The approach across the waves showed how essential timing is during an interdiction, because the conditions of the sea, the position of the disabled vessel, and the movements of the individuals on board all influence how safely the teams can carry out their responsibilities. The RHIB operators adjusted their speed as they closed the distance, and they worked to maintain a formation that allowed them to reach the vessel from 2 angles. This formation created a controlled environment that reduced the chance of sudden movement from the suspects and increased the safety of the boarding teams. As the RHIBs reached the vessel, the crews shifted from transit mode to boarding posture. This transition required focus because the stability of the disabled vessel was uncertain and any unexpected motion could create hazards. The boarding team leader monitored the position of the ladder and ensured that each member had sufficient space to climb without interruption. The sound of the helicopter overhead provided reassurance that the scene remained under observation, and this allowed the boarding units to concentrate on the immediate task. The team members stepped aboard one at a time and moved into positions that helped isolate the suspects from the edges of the vessel. The careful pacing of this sequence reflected the VBSS training model, which emphasizes measured movements that support both operational success and the protection of all individuals involved. Once aboard, the team issued firm and clear commands. The suspects complied without resistance and positioned themselves so the boarding team could restrain them safely. Their cooperation made the process more predictable and reduced the risk of escalation. The boarding team documented the condition and behavior of the suspects because these details are important for later stages of the investigation. The individuals appeared to be in their early to mid-30s, and their physical condition suggested that they had been under significant stress during the pursuit. The rapid transition from an attempted escape to full compliance underscored the effect of the earlier aerial intervention and demonstrated how quickly control can shift once a vessel is immobilized. After securing the suspects, the team conducted an initial assessment of the vessel to identify hazards and confirm that no additional individuals were present. The structure of the boat showed signs of wear and irregular maintenance, and the absence of safety equipment indicated non-compliance with maritime regulations. The engine damage caused by the precision fire was evident, and the crew examined the remaining systems to assess whether any operational capability remained. This inspection helped determine how the vessel might behave as it drifted and whether further measures were needed to stabilize it before recovery operations began. The condition of the deck also revealed traces of the discarded cargo, which helped confirm the observations made earlier by the helicopter crew. The assessment also identified several violations that aligned with indicators of long-range narcotics activity. The lack of registration markings, the absence of communication devices, and the poor structural integrity of the vessel all strengthened the case for seizure under maritime law. The team collected identifying details and photographed key components to support the documentation process. This information was essential for establishing a clear record that connected the vessel's condition to the actions observed during the chase. The careful documentation allowed the command team to prepare for the next steps in the operation, which would include evidence recovery and the transfer of the suspects into federal custody. The completion of the boarding stage shifted the focus of the mission once again. By bringing the suspects under control and confirming that the vessel no longer posed any immediate risk, the VBSS team created the conditions necessary for the recovery teams to begin their work. The coordinated efforts between the RHIB operators, the boarding personnel, and the helicopter crew showed how multi-layer cooperation supports maritime security in an area where criminal networks continue to test the limits of enforcement. This phase served as a bridge between the aerial pursuit and the detailed recovery that would follow, and it prepared the operational environment for the evidence handling procedures that formed the foundation of the later investigative steps. The transition from securing the suspects to recovering the evidence marked another critical stage in the operation, and this phase required detailed coordination because the narcotics had been partially dispersed across the surrounding waters. The recovery teams departed from the USS Sampson with equipment designed to locate, retrieve, and document each package. The teams moved carefully because the ocean current had already begun to shift the positions of the floating bales. The presence of the helicopter overhead helped maintain situational awareness, and it guided the teams toward the locations where the packages were most concentrated. This cooperation allowed the recovery process to begin without delay and supported the broader goal of preserving as much evidence as possible for the investigation. As the teams reached the area, they began marking the packages with identification tags. This step ensured that every bale collected would be recorded for chain of custody purposes. The process required precision because the packages varied slightly in buoyancy and drifted at different speeds. The teams used long-handled retrieval tools to bring each bale toward the RHIBs and then secured them on deck. Throughout this process, the operators paid close attention to the movement of the vessel, the sea state, and the proximity of other packages. Their actions demonstrated how field recovery operations rely on steady coordination between observation units and surface crews. The weight of the narcotics became clear as the first series of packages were brought aboard. Each bale was consistent with compressed cocaine shipments commonly associated with long-range smuggling operations. The combined weight reached approximately 3,439 pounds once all 47 bales were secured. The teams stored the packages in reinforced containers that protected the contents from moisture and prevented contamination. The scale of the seizure reflected the sophistication of the trafficking network involved, and it provided insight into the financial incentive that drives large maritime shipments. The primary estimate placed the wholesale value of the shipment at nearly $58 million, and further analysis suggested that the street value could multiply once distributed across North American markets. The conditions of the packages gave recovery specialists additional information about the manufacturing and handling process used by the trafficking organization. Many of the bales were tightly wrapped, yet the earlier reaction of one package in the water showed that the sealing process was not uniform. This inconsistency suggested a rushed or improvised packaging method, and it provided clues about the operational pressures faced by the smugglers. The teams recorded these observations because variations in packaging can help investigators identify links between different shipments. The presence of such a large and partially unstable shipment also highlighted the dangers associated with transporting narcotics by sea, both for the individuals involved and for the recovery teams working to secure the material. The successful collection of all 47 bales demonstrated the effectiveness of the coordinated recovery effort. The teams ensured that none of the packages drifted beyond reach and confirmed that the remaining debris around the vessel did not contain additional substances. The process established a clear evidentiary record and strengthened the broader investigation into the smuggling network. The recovery phase also reinforced the importance of maritime interdiction operations in limiting the capacity of criminal organizations to move large quantities of narcotics across international waters. With the evidence secured, the operation prepared to shift toward the next stage, which would include the legal classification of the vessel and the formal processing of the suspects under federal law. The classification of the vessel as a stateless craft placed it fully under the authority of international maritime law, and this status allowed the United States to take direct control of the scene. The absence of registration markings, communication equipment, and basic safety gear confirmed that the suspects were operating outside all recognized maritime regulations. As a result, the two individuals detained during the boarding phase were transferred for processing under the United States Maritime Drug Enforcement Protocol, which governs narcotics cases that occur in international waters. This transition marked the beginning of the formal legal process that will determine the long-term outcome of the case. The broader significance of the seizure extended beyond the arrest itself. The interception disrupted a major narcotics route that had been used by smuggling networks in the Eastern Pacific, and it demonstrated how coordinated operations under Pacific Watch can reduce the capacity of criminal groups to move large shipments across open waters. The success of this mission also highlighted the role of modern surveillance tools and the cooperation between naval aviation units and surface teams. The use of radar infrared systems and the MH-60R Seahawk, along with the rapid deployment of RHIB crews, showed how layered enforcement can counter increasingly sophisticated smuggling tactics. These developments suggest that future operations will continue to adapt as criminal networks search for new pathways, and they underscore the importance of maintaining a strong maritime presence as regional dynamics evolve. This operation shows how quickly the balance can shift at sea. If you found this analysis useful, don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Titan Navy to follow every new development as it unfolds.